Hi, YouTube channel followers with Byron Tyler. Glad to have you here today. We're looking forward to having a conversation with my dear friend Kim Carbo. Kim is the founder and director of Women of Hope International. There's some exciting things happening. They're celebrating 10 years as a ministry, and they do some incredible work with women with disabilities. We're going to share with her for the next half hour. I'd like to invite YouTube followers to subscribe to the channel, share the show, and be part of this. We're actually recording a radio show that will air really soon here on AM 640, FM 100.7. We're part of the Bot Radio Network here in Memphis, Tennessee. So anyway, thanks for joining us. And we're going to dive into our show because Kim has an appointment she has to make. So here we go. It started with 12 women in Seattle that prayed about what God might be asking them to do for women with disabilities in Sierra Leone. Women of Hope International was launched first as Women with Purpose. And today we have the founder and director. And she's the chief bottle washer too at times.
Sometimes.
Kim Carbo. Kim, welcome back to Mid-South Viewpoint. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Byron. Thanks for having me.
We have been friends now. Did we get together when Women of Hope? No, I'm not. You moved to Memphis. What year?
Well, we started in Memphis, but it was a couple years in, I think, before we connected. But it's been a number of years now.
Yeah, we've been sharing about the work, and it's grown. So much is happening.
It has.
And you gave me a birthday card because you're celebrating 10 years coming up on May 31st.
Yep.
That's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
And there's some other new things too that are happening with the work. But is it hard to believe that it's Jesus started with 12? And did you think about the parallel, the connection
there?
No,
I didn't. But that is interesting.
And really literally changed the world with 12.
Yeah.
And you're doing that today in addressing the needs of women with disabilities. And, here in the States, we might see somebody with a disability and not think a whole lot about it.
Mm-hmm.
There's ramps and there's accommodations made. Society as a whole has, they don't get treated less as a citizen. There are people who might look at, somebody with disability in a biased way or not a favorable way, but that's not the norm,
right?
You see, but there's places where you live and have lived in Sierra Leone where, women with disabilities are like less than third-class citizens.
Yeah. In fact, they're not even considered to be human beings. So, and it's not just women, it would be anybody, children, women, men. And as the ministry's grown, so we started with just, the purpose was to really reach women in Sierra Leone. Initially, it was women with amputations. And it very quickly became evident that amputations was going to be too small of a focus group for a whole ministry. And so in that initial founding meeting, we ended up expanding to women with any kind of disability. And then over the years, as our ministry's grown, now we're working a lot with local churches all over the world. So it's not just Sierra Leone anymore, and it's not just women. So that's why we're kind of heading into some big changes in the ministry.
I think that's very exciting. I'm looking forward to hearing about that. But originally, when you made the decision to focus on your efforts there in Sierra Leone, it's because you had some contact. You actually grew up in Sierra Leone. You were, your parents were missionaries there. So you had to experience the culture. Just for a couple of seconds, take us back to what it was like to be a child, growing up in a different country, like Sierra Leone, or you might not have thought about it. That was home for you.
Right. Yeah. It was normal for me. But I did. I was 9 years old when we moved to Sierra Leone. When my family moved there, my parents were Bible translators. So we lived in a small village, about 400 people. And no electricity, all while I was growing up. I went to boarding school for most of my schooling. When I got to high school, I had to go to a different country for boarding school because there wasn't a high school in our country. And it was. I sometimes forget how unusual that was because in my world, everybody lived like that.
Exactly.
So, living in Sierra Leone was really what got me connected to Women of Hope in the first place. Because I was asked to serve as a consultant to this group of women in Seattle who wanted to do something for women with amputations in Sierra Leone. And so they asked me to come and really as a consultant. And that was all I thought I was going to be doing at that time. And here we are 10 years later, and I have been the executive director for almost that entire time.
helping to provide women, in this case, we're going to say helping to provide all people with disabilities for a more dignified income generation. Because in many places where, you minister and work with people with disabilities, uh, trying to make an income. I mean, women oftentimes become prostitutes.
Mhm.
Uh, you know, it's very difficult to be
Mhm.
able to find a steady income or income to be able to
Yeah.
provide for your family or your own personal needs.
Right. And really, Sierra Leone is where we started, but as you know, around the global South, so most of the developing world, um, the views on disability are so much different than what we would really consider or what we wrestle with in our own minds. So as you said, we still have barriers in our own culture, both individual barriers with people's attitudes, but also societal barriers for people with disabilities to get jobs or feel like they're fully integrated and have full access to the services and community that they need. But in the developing world, it's considerably more difficult, both for really all because of just wrong belief systems. Believing that people with disabilities are either just not a full human being, believing that God has cursed them because of something that either they or their family members have done,
Right.
or believing that they're demons. Actually, so there's also there's sort of a spectrum of beliefs, but they're all negative.
Yes.
And so all of those wrong thinkings are what really creates the situation for people with disabilities in the developing world, primarily,
Right.
where they're hidden away, ostracized, marginalized, not allowed to participate fully in community, even with their very family. So you met Hawa a couple of years ago when
Yes.
she was here in the States.
She was right here in this
Yep.
studio. Yeah.
And one of the pieces of her testimony is that when she was growing up blind, her parents had 4 children, and anytime someone would ask her mother or father, "How many kids do you have?" They always said 3.5, and she was the half because they didn't consider her to be a full human being,
Oh my.
and that's certainly not unusual for people with disabilities in those places.
Kim, looking back over the past 10 years and the work you've done, you used the key word a moment ago, education, educating people. And I guess one of the greatest, educators is a personal testimony, a story that somebody can see. So if you take a woman, for example, who's lived in a community, who's been ostracized, who's been looked down upon, who has a disability, but you come in with Women of Hope and you spend time, you nurture her. She learns who her image is in our wonderful God who
Mhm.
created,
Mhm.
all humans. And so her countenance starts to change.
Yeah.
She starts learning a new work skill, so she's able to provide for the needs of her family. Uh, do you have stories where people all of a sudden now they're looking at this person in a different light now in the
Oh,
community?
yeah, so many, and that's really where we've seen, it start. So when we first started in Sierra Leone, we wanted to directly minister to the women and alongside them, but also knew that the community itself needed to be, transformed as well, because, if they kinda came along in their own personal journey, but then society still was blocking them from,
Yes.
any kind of, social interaction, that wouldn't be helpful either. So we initially started, a lot of radio programming, doing some media things to try to build awareness and help kind of change people's thinking process. But what we found was as women went through the training programs that we have, and we have our sort of signature training in Sierra Leone is called transformation training, and it's a 14-week training program that women can opt into. There are some fairly rigorous requirements that they have to meet. They have to agree to be at all of the sessions. So it's one day a week for 14 weeks. These are women that live hand to mouth one day at a time. So if they're not working that day or doing something to get income that day, they're probably not going to eat. So this was, them really having to rely on family members, neighbors to support them, or just figure out how to make do to take a whole day and come to training each week. So it was a big commitment. And if they miss more than one session in that 14-week time period, they're kicked out of the class.
Wow.
They also have to be on time, which, in the developing world, time isn't really a big value that's held.
Yeah.
We the reason why we made that requirement was our very first group of women that ever went through training, and that was at that time it was a longer training. Most of them were middle aged. Most of them had pretty significant physical disabilities that impaired their mobility. Every one of those women was on time. They were early, in fact, for class every single time they were supposed to be there. And all 10 of them, rain, shine, it didn't matter.
So you weren't being tough. I mean, this was
that was theirs. They set the standard. So we were like, well, shoot, if they can do it, then why don't we just set that as the standard for the rest of people and just raise the bar. They raised the bar. So so we just set that as a standard, and people have met it. They also there's a book that they get. It's mostly picture based because almost all of them are illiterate and have never gone to school, because that's one of the doors of access that's closed to them often, is not being able to get an education. So for most of them, they've never actually held a book in their hand. They've never actually even held onto a book or held a pen or a pencil to write. And so, there's that educational and literacy barrier. But they have to buy their book, and they don't buy it for what it costs us, obviously.
Sure.
But they do pay for it. They end up paying about the equivalent of I think it's about $1.50 for the book. And for most of them, that's still a stiff amount. So they make payments over the course of the 14
so
weeks.
that could be a day's or a couple of days' wage, couldn't it?
Yeah. So they literally make, like a few cents every week, and they pay off their book by the end of the training program.
Again, you're instilling back in them, when we talk about instilling dignity in people, that helps them in the process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And for most of them, they're so excited. They're, one of the first sessions that they do, they learn how to write a signature, because most of them have never written anything before.
Yeah.
And so, they come in, they're like, I can't do that. Well, and then, we walk them through in that class, writing their own signature. Now, it might not be their full name, but a mark that would be, maybe it's their initials or
identifies
an identifying signature.
Yeah.
And there's been so many stories of women who've said, I went to the school to get my child's marks or grades, and they gave me a thumb pad print to do my thumbprint. And I said, no, I need a pen.
Yeah.
And the people were like, wait, what? So, it was just it brought them such dignity and honor to be able to write their name like an educated person would. And it helps them to hold their head higher. So what we realized was, as women went through this training, they themselves changed about how they felt about themselves. And that then began to facilitate a change among the people that they lived with. And so as people started looking at them and looking at, now their clothes are clean, they're bathing regularly, their kids are clean, their kids are healthier sometimes than the community around them because they've learned some basic health principles. They're changing their cooking methods to incorporate healthier principles. Just a whole host of things. And the neighbors start to look at them and say, wait a minute. She used to be the dirty one. Why is she cleaner than me? And so that's been really the piece that has started to change the community's view of the people with disabilities. And they have to take notice. They have to start to rethink, because what they thought, this person's not valuable, they're dirty, they're we shouldn't even associate with them. And then as women get more income, they start helping their neighbors. And they're like, whoa, wait, what happened there? So it's impossible for them not to have to go, maybe what I thought was wrong. And so that starts to change. And, as people the other thing is, the women themselves are more confident. So they start interacting with people who are able-bodied, which they didn't before. So they themselves became reticent because there was so much rejection. And you know how rejection does that to us. It makes us withdraw.
They do, totally.
And so as they gain confidence, they start reaching out. And so when you get to know somebody who's different than you, regardless of what it is, it doesn't matter if you're talking about race or disability level or ethnicity or culture. Once you start to know a person that's different than you, you can't keep those barriers up anymore. They have to fall down.
I love this. I love this. This is so great. And another example, I was thinking back, it's been a couple of years, and I know more than once, the Ebola outbreak in West Africa. And there in Sierra Leone back, how many years ago has it been now?
It was in 2014 and 15.
Yeah, and I know that the ladies in your program were quite instrumental in being able to take these booklets that you created and go out into the different villages and distribute those and then help with the hygiene and things that, we're trying to address this issue of Ebola. Yeah,
they were going, because they had community health training, and then we provide them with additional training, particularly about Ebola. They were able to help their neighbors be less fearful and more empowered to be able to fight the disease as opposed to be afraid of it.
Any stories from that you can think of, particularly,
I think I don't have any specific stories. I just know that we did have feedback during that time of, my neighbor who is in this Women of Hope program came and brought me this pamphlet. And when I walked through that, I was less fearful, so I don't have a specific name of a person, but I know that there were those things that were happening during that time. And people were so scared of each other at
Yes.
that time, so breaking down fear was one of the really key elements.
I was thinking about Women of Hope International as an organization, but I think even a better definition would be an organism. It's because in the body of Christ, we're not just an organization,
Right.
like the Lions Club or
Right.
something. We are an organism. We are the body of Jesus Christ, and as we look into the book of Acts and we see the early founding of the church, the book of Acts doesn't close like other books in the New Testament, by Paul or Timothy saying, I greet thee, close your say farewell. It's
Right.
like an open-ended book. It's
Yeah.
still, and so when the ministry of Women of Hope 10 years ago started, it's that organism. It's growing.
Yeah.
Things are changing.
Yeah.
And you've got some big announcements to make real soon.
Yeah. Well, on June 1st is actually our official sort of birthday. That's the anniversary of Women of Hope will be 10 years. So we're celebrating Friday night on the 31st with a birthday party. And we would love anybody that's listening. I don't know if it's going to be aired before then, but if it is, but we've got more celebrations coming up.
It
too.
will be. Yeah,
So-
we'll get this on the air before the celebration.
Well, we don't want everybody to know yet because we got to keep it a secret.
Oh, it's gotta be a secret.
Yeah, it's got to be a secret.
So we can't give the details yet.
No, we
Okay.
can't. Well, if
Yeah.
it's not going out yet, then we can't.
Well,
'cause
right
we
now
can
we're
announce.
live on YouTube.
Oh well, then
So we have to be careful.
Yeah, we
Okay.
do.
So
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
can't let anything out of
Uh-uh.
Okay.
No, but if people that come to the birthday party on the 31st will actually be able to get the sort of pre-reveal. So the actual announcement of new name, new branding, new everything, new logo, new website, all of that is being revealed on the 1st.
Okay.
But those that come to the birthday party on the 31st will kind of get a preview. And
You know what that
they'll
means,
know
don't
first.
you? That means you're going to have to come back with all the new details.
Well, we'll have to do that.
Yeah, totally. We'll talk about some of the way the staffing and the organization has changed, over the last 10 years.
Yeah. So we, like I said, we started originally, it was women with amputations. And quickly we realized, it needed to be women with disabilities in Sierra Leone. And we started with 250 women. That's what we had registered when we got started in 2009. And that was just in the town of McKinney, where we work in Sierra Leone. Currently in Sierra Leone, and Women of Hope Sierra Leone is organized separately as a separate entity from Women of Hope International. And currently, Women of Hope Sierra Leone has about 800 women registered in 4 different locations, right, in the surrounding areas around McKinney. So we have 4 different outposts where there are trainings going on and just support and community awareness. Bible studies are happening. So there are 800 women that are registered. Now, obviously, all of them are not active at the same level as each other.
Sure.
Some are very active, some are less active. But that's not all of the people. There's more than that. And so Women of Hope Sierra Leone is still going to be Women of Hope Sierra Leone, and they're going to be working just with women, as was the intention from the very beginning. And they're expanding too. There's lots of expansion happening just within Sierra Leone. But then about in 2016, actually prior to that, maybe in 2013, we realized, one of the biggest barriers to access that people have with disabilities and that our women were having as they would come to know that God loved them, that he had made them with a purpose, that they were made in his image, and that they weren't a mistake, and they weren't a punishment. They weren't a curse. When they started realizing that, they wanted to know more about this God that loved them, and they would start looking for a church to go to. And we actually had women who were banned from coming into church because the pastor didn't want them in the congregation out of fear that either his congregation would catch something from them, or that they were a curse and would.
And this is the church.
This is the church.
Yeah.
So as we this was tragic and heartbreaking, and so we thought, the church needs to be taught also, because who better to understand God's heart for people with disabilities and God's heart just for human beings and for the oppressed, which is really the category that people with disabilities fall into in the developing world primarily. And so we developed a church, like a one-day church, kind of an awareness, but it was kind of rethinking disability from a biblical standpoint. So we developed this church workshop and started doing it first in Sierra Leone, because our original intention was, let's just get churches in the local area to understand better about disabilities so that as women come to know the Lord, they can be discipled. And so that was our original intent. And we have had, ever since the beginning, lots and lots of requests. We get them, several a month, actually, from all over the world. Come and start Women of Hope in our country, and we need this too. And So we really just were wrestling with, we don't have the capacity to recreate what's happening in Sierra Leone and, all these countries around the world. It's very labor intensive, very time intensive, and
Sure.
we just didn't have the capacity. And we didn't really feel like that was what the Lord was asking us to do. So we just kept wrestling with, what do we do? Because the need is great and the need is global. It's not just Sierra Leone. And then took this church workshop and kind of blew that out a little bit and started offering it, and developed a whole curriculum called the Theology of Disability. And so we have this Theology of Disability curriculum, which is specifically geared at churches, local churches, and Christian ministries. So it might be small nonprofits, NGOs, or big ones, doesn't matter, who work in the developing world, but who are not integrating people with disabilities in their program, or in their congregation, or whatever their
Right.
context is. And so the Theology of Disability curriculum kind of came out of some trainings we did in India in 2016. And that was a good place for us to kind of wrestle out with the people there, the local church leaders there, what was going to be the best content that would be relevant globally, so it wouldn't be specific to Sierra Leone, and to test, are these principles relevant in a completely different culture than West Africa? And they were, yeah, well, because they're God's, they're
Yes,
they're not
totally.
ours. It's
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
it's a deep dive Bible study is what it is.
Yeah.
But then there's a lot of practical application on, moving our own attitudes up a scale, from just a ignorance about disability to being co-laborers with people with disabilities, and there's sort of 5 stages that fall along a continuum. And so helping people evaluate, where am I on this
Mhm.
continuum and how do I keep moving forward? So our Theology of Disability curriculum has really been the thing that has taken off. I mean, Women of Hope Sierra Leone is still taking off and it's still doing what it does.
Sure.
But the Theology of Disability curriculum is really where, over the last few years, a lot of our efforts stateside, because we have a full team in Sierra Leone who runs the ministry there. We go there a couple times a year to check in, to bring additional training resources, whatever might be needed in the ministry there, and to continue to walk alongside them. But from the stateside viewpoint, the Theology of Disability curriculum through what we call our Equip branch. So we have 2 branches of ministry: is Women of Hope Sierra Leone is one, and Equip is the other.
Yeah.
And those will all fall under this umbrella, which we're not going to say
We're going to say right
today,
now.
right?
But so basically, you can train facilitators.
Right.
to
So
be
we
able-
train trainers. It's
Yeah.
a 4-day training. It was a 3-day. It's moving to a 4-day training. We actually have 2 staff in Burundi right now, who are getting ready to get on a plane this afternoon and head back. Just finished a training in Burundi with 21 church leaders. We've done trainings in India, in Nepal. I just came back from Nepal a few weeks right before Easter. We've done in Ghana, in Zimbabwe, Zambia, Liberia, all over the globe.
This is incredible.
And yeah, so it's just,
Wow.
things have really taken off, and our staff here is growing and expanding, because we need to, in order to accommodate, all the various trains. We still can't accommodate all that we need to. We're still, we don't have the resources to do that. We do have a very firm partnership agreement. Whenever people request training from us and we agree to go do it, we'll pay for our plane tickets to get there. But everything on the ground has to be the local ministry. And so, they have to lodge the trainers that go, they have to feed the trainers, and they have to provide all the training costs, as
Yes.
well as in-country transportation.
They have to have an
So-
investment. Yeah.
Yeah, so there
Totally.
has to be buy-in. And, these are small indigenous local
Yes,
ministries. So it's a real commitment on their part to host a training. And they, we cap out at 25 because it's
Well,
a very participatory training.
To me, it
So we don't
sounds
want
like it
too many.
speaks well of those who are, interested in engaging this opportunity.
Yeah.
As you said, that some of these churches, are closed doors toward
Right.
people with disabilities.
Right.
So this is really a step forward, in that
But
effort.
God touches the heart of people all over, and those people are catalysts, and so there are always, in every community, there are people who
Yes.
have the compassionate heart of God and have realized his heart for those who are oppressed and marginalized and want to do something. And so somehow it's not like we do advertising. Somehow they find us and write to us and ask, hey, can we get this training? We need that here.
Wow.
And, then usually it's a process of 6 to 12 months of talking through things and, figuring out when we can schedule time. But we've done, so many trainings in the last couple of years.
This is so, wow, this is so God,
Yeah.
and it's so wonderful to see his hand in the work that he called you to. I mean, did you ever I mean, I know that at the beginning, if God had told you exactly the whole plan, from back in 2009, what do
Yeah.
you want? You'd say, call somebody else probably.
Probably,
I'm not
yeah.
the one.
Yeah, probably.
But talk just for a second. We don't have much time. We're very at the end of our show now, but I want you to maybe take just a very short time and talk about what it has been meant for you personally in
Mm.
your personal walk with Jesus Christ, and seeing how he's called you into this, and just how he has provided people, provided resources, opened up doors of ministry,
Mhm.
you know?
Yeah, that's such well, we only have how many minutes?
Well,
Um,
you got
so
30 seconds. No.
it has been, and I know I would not be the only one that would say this. This has been the testimony of staff that have worked in our program since the beginning, that our own transformation and healing has taken place in the context of ministering among people who are hurting and have disabilities. And one of the things I think that I have come to know, not just to realize in my head, but know, is that we all have a disability. And of course, sin is our biggest disability, right? And
Yes.
that's been healed for us by the blood of Christ. But the blood of Christ does so much more than that, and it touches all the areas of disability. We have fears that cripple us. We have um, reservations or things that are just unsettled within ourselves that really create barriers for us to be able to live to our fullest potential. We have misunderstandings about God that don't allow us to live in the abundant life that Christ has provided for us. And so all of those things have been we've been able I have been able, and my staff would testify for the same thing, to wrestle through those things over the last few years, even just for our own selves. And it's been working among the poor and the vulnerable that has opened up our eyes to our own vulnerabilities and our own hurts, and to really be able to understand and comprehend the healing that is available in a holistic manner through Christ and through the gospel. And that
Wow.
has been the thing that I think, Paul talks about this thorn in the flesh. A lot of theologians believe it was some kind of disability. That the Lord said, "No, I'm not going to take that, from you. My strength is sufficient for you. My grace is sufficient for you, and my strength is made perfect in your weakness." And so
Yes.
that's my testimony, because I didn't have the skills to do what we're doing today. I still don't have the skills to do what I'm doing today, but God continues to say, "My grace is sufficient for you, and my strength is made perfect in your weakness." Not I'm going to make you strong, but you be weak and I'll be strong, right? And so that's been something that's been a really good journey for me as well.
That is a incredible word, Kim. Thank you so much for being so transparent and real. I mean, that's really, we need to embrace those around us. You say that, don't have as much. And, that's really Jesus
Hmm.
expressing, love, compassion, and for those that have disabilities, I mentioned before, I grew up as a young boy, had some neighbors that had children and foster children with disabilities. So I
Hmm.
spent time with them. And you're right, there is such valuable lessons that you learn about life,
Yeah.
and it's God has provided these people, uh they're our brothers, our sisters,
Hmm.
for us, to learn from, and to
Yeah.
grow together and support and help. So thank you so much what you continue to do, and I'm excited to hear, can't say right now,
Yeah.
but the news of the changes,
Yeah.
the new name, the new branding, everything that's going to happen on June 1st. And so you can go to the website. We don't even have an address to give. If you go to Women of Hope
Yep.
International, it will take you
Yes.
to the new
Well,
site, or
the site's not live yet.
it's not
So
live yet.
it's
So
still womenofhopeinternational.org.
yeah.
And that site will stay until we get the new one up and running. So we're still working out tweaks on that. But
Okay. You have any prayer requests that we could share with our
oh,
friends before we say goodbye? I mean, I know you
yeah,
got tons, but
we
anything on
do.
that, maybe a couple?
I think for people that are local in the area, we're always looking for people to just come alongside the ministry and volunteer. So that would be one thing that the Lord would provide the resources. So whether that's human resources, we have some staffing positions that are open, the financial resources, because the need is so much greater than what we're able to address right now. And we would be happy to do more, but right now we're limited in what we
Yes.
can do. And there are ministries and churches out there that are asking, come and help us understand better what God's heart for disability is, and help us to include people more effectively. And so we want to meet that need, but right now we're limited.
Okay.
So people to come alongside and for God to supply all that is needed.
What's that web address?
womenofhopeinternational.org.
Kim Carbo, God bless you, my dear sister. Thank you for what you're doing for Christ's kingdom. Thanks for stopping by.
Thank you.
Friends, that's all the time we have on this edition of Mid-South Viewpoint. Thanks for joining us. I'm Byron Tyler, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye. Hey, you too, friends. Thanks for joining Kim and I. And I know you were blessed and encouraged and learned more about the work of Women of Hope International, its history and its 10 years of celebrating, impacting people with disabilities, and the new changes that are on the horizon. So make sure you keep in tune with the work. And we appreciate you stopping by. Please subscribe to my channel. Share the video. Thanks for watching.